Oh, say shalom bimromav. Huya say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Vimru, vimru, amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Shana Tova, and welcome to our live stream service for Erev Rosh Hashanah here at Tifereth Israel Synagogue in Des Moines. And we're going to begin on page 4 with Psalm 92, a psalm for Shabbat.
Mizmor shir liyom hashabbat, Mizmor shir liyom hashabbat, Mizmor shir liyom hashabbat, Mizmor shir liyom hashabbat. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, uzamer l'shimho elyon, להגיד בבוקר חסדך ונמותך בלילות. עלי אסור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור, כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך רנן. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יזכה. התולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. וג'נבון בשיבה, דשנים ורענים יהיו. להגיד כי ישר אדוני, זורי ולא עוולתה בו. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. We continue on page 5, Baruch. Please rise. Baruchu et Adonai. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
You can be seated.
Continue silently. Baruch El Chai Vekayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Leolam Vaed. page 6.
Love your people, house of Israel, with infinite love. You taught us Torah mitzvot, statutes and laws.
ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך וקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Adonai Elohechem emet, emet ve'emuna kol zot, ve'kayam aleinu, ki hu Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ein zulato, v'anachnu Yisrael, performs wonders beyond understanding, marvels beyond all reckoning. God places us among the living, not allowing our steps to falter. Middle of page 8. Umalchuto beratzon, kibalu alehem, Moshe u'Miriam uvnei Yisrael, l'chanu shira, v'simcha rabah, v'amaru hulam, michamocha belim Adonai, mikamocha nedar b'kodesh, Norot hilot o seifele, Malchutecha rovanecha, Bokei ayam lifnei Moshe, Zeli anu ve'amaru, Adonai imloch leolam vaed, V'nehemar kifada Adonai et Yaakov, Ugalo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
Page 9 on your left-hand side. Peace comes to us in the recognition that even in our weakest and most fragile moments, redemption can be achieved. The central image in this upcoming prayer is the sukkah of peace. The sukkah is a fragile structure, temporary, and open to the elements. Peace is pictured not as a temple solidly built, gilded, perhaps even ornate, but rather as created out of the most fragmentary of materials, leaving us vulnerable and at risk. We'll continue on page 9.
Ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, Baruch atah Adonai, haporeis sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Vishamru, bottom of page 9, please rise. Vishameru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Beni uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam. Beni uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, uvayom hashavi shavat vayinafash.
Page 10, please stay standing as you are able.
Tiku v'chodesh shofar, B'kesel yom chagenu, Ki chok leYisrael hu, Mishpat leElohei Yaakov.
Page 10, Deirdre will continue with the Hatzi Kaddish, and then we will go into the silent Amidah, which will continue through page 17. And please don't forget the insertions for Shabbat. They will be in red in your book.
Yikadal v'yikadash Shemei Rabbah Be'alamar Divera Kirutei V'yamlich Machutei B'chayechon Uvyomechon Uchayedecho Beit Yisrael Bagala Uvizman Kariv Ve'imru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam ulamei amaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal Shemei dekutsha Berichu le'ela Mikol birchata v'shirata Tush bechato v'nechemata Damiran be'alema V'imru amen.
Begin the Amidah on page 11. Please use your insertions for Shabbat in red.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, vimru, vimru, amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
The blessing of shalom, which is on page 16 on the left-hand side in English. When the blessing of shalom is lacking, however much we have of other blessings, wealth or power, fame or family, even health, these all appear as nothing. But when shalom is present, however little else we have somehow seems sufficient. Shalom means peace, of course, but it means so much more as well. Wholeness, fullness, and completion, integrity and perfection, healing, health, and harmony, utter tranquility, loving and being loved, consummation, forgiveness and reconciliation, and totality of well-being. And even all of these together do not spell out sufficiently the meaning of shalom. But though we cannot accurately translate or adequately define shalom, we can experience it. Continue on page 18 with a little bit of extra stuff because it's Shabbat tonight.
Vaychulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol zevam vaychal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i melachto asher asa vayishbot b'yom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa Vayvarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i vaykadesh oto ki vo shavat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim lasot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor, V'Hanora El Elyon, Konei Shamayim, Va'aretz, Magen Avot Bidvaro, Mechaye Metim B'Mamaro, HaMelech HaKadosh Ein Kamohu, HaMeniach Le'amo, B'Yom Shabbat Kodsho, Kivam Ratza L'Haniach Lahem, Kivam Ratza L'Haniach Lahem, L'Fanav Navod B'Yirav V'Fachad, V'Nodeh Lishmo B'Chol Yom Tamid, Mein habrachot El hahodaot Adon hashalom Mekadesh hashabbat V'arech shavi Umeniach bikdusha Lamed tushanei oneg Zecher l'maaseh L'maaseh v'reishit. Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu, Retzei v'mnuchateinu. וקדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך. סבהנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעובדך באמת. והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך ונוחובה ישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen. Page 19, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמא היה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשא בריחו לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
תתגבל דלות ההון ובאות ההון דכל ישראל קודם מבוהון דבישמעיה ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שלמה רבה משמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. אמן.
Thank you, Deirdre. From the day Adam and Eve were exiled from the Garden of Eden, they lived together east of Eden, tilling the earth, raising children, struggling to stay alive. After those many years of struggle, when their children were grown, Adam and Eve decided to take a journey before it was too late and see the world that God had created. They stood upon the great mountains, trekked across the vast deserts, walked amid the mighty forests, and traversed the magnificent seas. They watched the sun rise over the endless wilderness and saw it set into the boundless ocean. In the course of their journey, they came upon a place that seemed so familiar. They came upon the Garden of Eden, from which they had been exiled on the very first day of their lives. The garden was now guarded by an angel with a flaming sword. This angel frightened Adam and Eve, who fled. Suddenly they heard a voice, a gentle, imploring voice. God spoke to them. "My children, you have lived in exile these many, many years. Your punishment is complete. Come home now and return to my garden." The angel disappeared. The way into the garden opened, and God invited them in. But Adam, having spent so many years in the world, had grown shrewd. He hesitated and said to God, "You know, it has been so many years. Remind me, what is it like in the garden?" "The garden is paradise," God responded. "In the garden, there is no work. You need never struggle or toil again. There is no pain, no suffering, no death. In the garden, there is no time, no yesterday, no tomorrow, only an endless today. Come, my children, return to the garden. Adam considered God's words. He thought about a life with no work, no struggle, no pain, and no passage of time, and no death. An endless life of ease with no tomorrow and no yesterday. And then he turned and looked at Eve, his wife. He looked into the face of the woman with whom he had struggled to make a life, to take bread from the earth, to raise children, and to build a home. He read in the lines of her face all the tragedies they had overcome and the joys that they had cherished. He saw in her eyes all the laughter and all the tears that they had shared. Eve looked back into Adam's face. She saw in his face all the moments that had formed their lives, moments of jubilant celebration and moments of unbearable pain. She remembered the moments of life-changing crises and the many moments of simple tenderness and love. She remembered the moments when a new life arrived in their world and the moments when death intruded. As all their shared moments came back to her, she took Adam's hand in hers. Looking into his wife's eyes, Adam shook his head and responded to God's invitation. "No, thank you," he said. "That's not for us. We don't need that now. Come on, Eve," he said to his wife. "Let's go home." And Adam and Eve turned their backs on God's paradise and walked home. There is a Twilight Zone episode from 1961, which I watched about 30 years ago, about 30 years after it had been filmed, which has always haunted me, especially recently. In the episode, two former soldiers, a man and a woman, played by Elizabeth Montgomery and Charles Bronson, stumble upon each other in a deserted town. The town, the narrator tells us, is a jungle, a monument built by nature honoring disuse, commemorating a few years of nature being left to its own devices. But, the narrator continues, it's another kind of jungle, the kind that comes in the aftermath of man's battles against himself. Hardly an important battle, the narrator says, not a Gettysburg or a Marne or an Iwo Jima. More like one significant corner patch in the crazy quilt of combat. But it was enough to end the existence of this little city. It has been years since a human being walked the streets of that city. Elizabeth Montgomery and Charles Bronson, not yet the monumental stars that they would become, and a different kind of Adam and Eve, nervously edge towards each other and retreat through the episode, sometimes acting out violently and stopping at the last minute. Little by little, silently, they move closer together. The episode is almost entirely devoid of dialogue. They move closer, maybe because they sense they might be the only people left, maybe because they are craving intimacy in their loneliness, or maybe a combination. Near the end of the episode, Charles Bronson spots a wedding dress in a window, and he offers it to Elizabeth Montgomery, who shoots at him twice, but who sits with the dress overnight. The next day, she peeks out at him, and he is all dressed up in a tuxedo, and he starts to scream at her, telling her to take her war somewhere else. But when she emerges in the dress, he smiles, hands her a can of peaches that he had found, and they walk away with their backs towards the camera, holding hands. We as a community, as a country, as a world are in such a difficult time. I feel like I have been saying that on this bima at this time of year since I arrived in Des Moines. But this year, it is not a premonition, a foreshadowing. It is real, and it is so evident, never more than now, as I stare out into a video camera, actually several video cameras, to speak to you, in a room with videographers, Sue and Deirdre, but not all of you. I miss you all. And I can see you in my mind, but most of all, I can see and feel you in my heart. And this, all of this, these months are hard. There is so much loss for all of us. Independence, income, inability to see loved ones, losing loved ones to COVID-19 or other illness, loss of stability, security, and so on. This time has been in another way a loss of innocence, like what happened to Adam and Eve when they left Eden. I said to many people when this pandemic began that it was going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Now, we all know that I am no runner, but I spent most of my high school years as a long-distance competitive swimmer. I swam for myself, but at the same time as 5 other swimmers. My events were the 200-yard butterfly and the 1 mile or 1650-yard freestyle, which is 66 lengths of a pool. Both events taught me at a young age, amongst other things, the value, the ups and downs, and the tenacity of the journey. When that gun goes off and you dive off that block into the water, you can't go back. And you can't just stop and give up because it's hard. Well, you can, but the event is finished for you. But when you get to the end of that race, knowing how far you came, the inner strength it took to get you there, even then, I got it. With this pandemic, it is like we are in the middle of a 1 mile swim. We can't really go back to the starting block. We already dove off, even if it feels like we were pushed off. We can choose to tread water for no purpose, looking to be saved, or we can continue on the journey and be grateful for the strength that we have to continue. I had hopes when we began our journey with this pandemic that in many ways the destruction of our previous way of life, our exile in a sense, would lead us back to each other, would build bridges of compassionate intimacy in new ways, and even in our polarized world, we would draw, slightly maybe, closer together. That the losses and struggles we experienced, too much screen time, very few hugs, Zoom Shiva, homeschooling while working, a burning West Coast, destruction from derecho, juxtaposed with the gifts, more opportunity to enjoy the outside, learning technology, whether we want to or not, appreciating our health and the blessings we do have, even if they feel small, that the mix of this would help us to adapt to our new reality, but most of all, to help us realize how lucky we really are to be alive right now, to be able to breathe and love and try and keep going. In some ways, I have seen my hopes come true. In other ways, I have been bitterly disappointed. I find as this all continues, longer than we had hoped and definitely wanted, I have seen more anger and frustration in others, not drawing nearer, but pushing away. We are still in the middle of that 1 mile swim, though, and maybe when it ends, our experiences of this year and this pandemic will be transformed. The two Adam and Eve stories, one from Rabbi Ed Feinstein's book Capturing the Moon, and the other from a Cold War era Twilight Zone episode, are different and yet not. Both couples tragically find themselves in a reality that they didn't want, and in some ways they were complicit in that new reality, and in other ways it was forced upon them. Much like the situation that we are in today. Elizabeth Montgomery and Charles Bronson, the Twilight Zone's anti-Adam and Eve, in a frightening and yet poignant way, make a choice to create connection, intimacy, and maybe even love out of the ashes of a wrecked world because they have no other alternative. Rabbi Feinstein's story, Paradise, is an ideal, and my hope for all of you in 5781. Can you look at what you have lost and yet still love the world for what it is and what you are lucky to have? Still. About 10 years after the Twilight Zone episode 2, which is what it's called, if you ever want to look it up, aired on television, Joni Mitchell wrote and recorded the song Woodstock. In it she sings, "Can I walk beside you? I have come here to lose the smog, and I feel to be a cog in something turning. Well, maybe it is just the time of year, or maybe it's the time of man. I don't know who I am, but you know, life is for learning. We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden." Joni Mitchell is right in so many ways. And we really are stardust. Nearly all the elements in the human body were made in a star, and many have come through several supernovas. But the garden, our innocence, our lives before loss, we can't get back there, not even if we wanted to. We've already seen and experienced and loved and lost too much. However, maybe this year and in the years to come, we can open our hearts and souls to a life that we didn't necessarily expect or even want, but maybe, just maybe, we can acknowledge that we are blessed and lucky enough to have. Shana Tova. May it be a sweet year for you, if sometimes bittersweet, and Shabbat Shalom. Maybe peace and rest will come, even or especially when you're exhausted. We'll continue now on page 24 with Kiddush and the Shechianu. If it is your custom to rise at this time, please rise. If it is your custom to sit, please sit.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'am v'romanu mikol lashon v'kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'titein lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ahava et yom hashaphat hazeh ve'et yom hazikaron hazeh yom zikron teruah be'ahava mikra kodesh zecher zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim Kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta b'kol ha'amim כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים. ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש השבת. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש השבת. מקדש השבת וישראל ויום הזיכרון. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Continue with Elenu on page 25.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגובהי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום והשב אותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. על כן נקווה לך אדוני אלוהינו, לראות מהרה בתפארת עוזך, להעביר גילולי מן הארץ, והלילים כרות שיקרתון. לתקן העולם במלכות שדי, וכל בני בשר יקראו בשמך, להפנות אליך כל ראשי הארץ. יכירו וידעו כל יושבי תבל, כי לך תקרא כל ברך תשבע כל לשון. לפניך אדוני אלוהינו, יקראו ויפולו, ולכבוד שמך יקר ייתנו, ויקבלו כולם את עול מלכותך, ותמלוך עליהם מהרה לעולם ועד. כי המלכות שלך היא עולמי, תמלוך בכבוד. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Now we're going to turn to page 27. Page 27 for the Psalm for the Season of Repentance.
Adonai orivi shi mimi ira, Adonai me'os chayai mimi echad. Achat shalti me'et Adonai, ota v'hakesh. Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai otav akesh. Shivti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai. Lachasot ben Noam Adonai uvaker beheichalo. Lachasot ben Noam Adonai uvaker beheichalo. Kavel Adonai chavas v'yemei slipecha v'kavel Adonai.
Page 26 on the left-hand side of the margin in English. The blessing of memory. It is hard to sing of oneness when our world is not complete, when those who once brought wholeness to our life have gone, and nothing but memory can fill the emptiness their passing leaves behind. But memory can tell us only what we were, in company with those we loved. It cannot help us find what each of us alone must now become. Yet no one is really alone. Those who live no more echo still within our words and our thoughts, and what they did is part of what we have become. We do best homage to our dead when we live our lives most fully, even in the shadow of our loss. For each of our lives is worth the life of the whole world. In each one is the breath of the divine. In affirming God, we affirm the worth of each one whose life, now ended, brought us closer to the source of life, in whose unity no one is alone, and every life finds purpose. This week, starting tonight, we mark the art sites of the following people: Lester Bookie, Martin Greller, Rose Fisher, Leonard Rosenthal, Benjamin Seatman, Anna Badower, Edward Glazer, Jacob Gould, Esther Gavant, Dorothy Lederman, Samson Perlmutter, Esther Berg, Larry Myers, Max Steinway, Sarah Galinsky, Kimberly Parker, and Charles Silver. We also remember the recent passings of Marilyn Ann Hurwitz, the beloved wife of Louis Hurwitz, and beloved mother of Eddie, Jody, and Michael Hurwitz, and Ruth Krantz Engman, the beloved mother of Josh Engman, Susie Weber, and Shelley Engman, and the beloved sister of Audrey Rosenberg. May all of the memories always be for a blessing whenever possible. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 26. All those who are observing a yard site, all those who are in mourning, please say along with me and please rise. If it is your custom to rise in solidarity with the mourners or to say Kaddish for people who have no one to say Kaddish for them, please also rise at this time and say along with me. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute, B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, Bagala uv'izman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehe shmei Rabbah mivarach leolam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha brichu. Le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehe shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. You can have a seat. I have a few announcements, and then we'll conclude our service for tonight. So I we'll say again, I miss all of you, and whoever is tuning in, I am seeing you and the people who usually come on the Erev Rosh Hashanah service in my mind, and all of you who don't normally come for Rosh Hashanah, I am also seeing you as well and thinking of you, even though we can't be together during this time. I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that you can tune into the live stream tomorrow morning starting at 10 a.m. It is going to be an abbreviated Rosh Hashanah service. We made pre-recorded videos for the traditional Rosh Hashanah service if you want to follow along with that. I expect that the alternative abbreviated service that we're doing will have a lot of traditional elements, a little bit more English, and be a lot shorter than you are used to, which might be good for you. And the sermon will come towards the end, closer to but probably somewhere around 11:30 or so. I'm not entirely sure, but in the second half. So that's tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then Sunday, instead of a formal second day Rosh Hashanah service, we encourage you to watch the traditional videos if that's something that you would like to do. And we made it as user-friendly technologically as possible, where all you have to do is make some clicks and leave the website open, and you don't have to fiddle with too many things. No Zooming. This is all going to be live streamed throughout the holidays. But Sunday afternoon, we're going to have an outdoor service, weather permitting, although I think it looks good, at 4 o'clock at the Glendale Cemetery for Tashlich and to hear the shofar being blown in person. The shofar is not blown on Shabbat, so you will not hear the shofar tomorrow, but you can hear it if you come outside on Sunday, or you can watch the pre-recorded video of the shofar service from the Torah service. And with that, I hope that you all have a really nice night and rest of your Rosh Hashanah, and see you in cyberspace. And Deirdre will conclude with Yigdal on page 28.
Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach Nimsa v'ed el metziuto Echad ve'en yachid k'yihudo Ne'elam v'gam ein sof l'achduto Ein lo damut haguf ve'eino guf Lo na'aroch elav kedushato Kadmon lechol davar asher nivra Rishon ve'en reshit l'reshito Hino Adon Olam v'chol notzar Yoreh gedulato umalchuto Shefa nevuato netano El anshe segulato v'tifarto Lo kam beYisrael kemoshe od Navi umabit et emunato Torah temet natan le'am oel Aya nevio neman beito Lo yachalif ha'el V'lo yamir dato le'olamim le'zulato Zofe ve'yodea setarenu Mabid le'sof davar bekadmato Gomer le'ish chesed kemifalo Noten l'rasha rakarishato Yishlak l'kesh yamin meshichenu Lifdod mechakei kes Yeshuato. Meti Michael Beroch Hasto. Baruch Hadead Shem Tehilato. Meti Michael Beroch Hasto. Baruch Hadead Shem Tehilato.
Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom. See you soon. Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you. That was a great sermon.